Hello, hello, welcome, please come in. It's time to resume our bow-only runs, this week in our final game of the series, Elden Ring. And of course, I will be starting as the samurai for the bow and the nice arrow diversity. And like every Elden Ring run, this run is going to start by running a bunch of errands, because there is a lot for me to pick up around the map before things can properly get started. First, I jump off this cliff to not fight the first boss here. I would almost certainly die, and frankly, I don't think I even have enough arrows to kill this boss right now, even if I were good enough to do so. Then over to Melina to pick up Torrent and the ability to level. Then grab the Whetstone Knife. Over to this church to pick up the Wondrous Physic, then over to Fort Height to grab the Dectus Medallion half and kill this Blood Knight. This clears out the fort so I can safely pick up some Blood Roses and the cookbook that will let me make bleed arrows, which I will need a lot of. Ronnie gives me the Spirit Calling Bell, and I can then ride over to War Master's Shack to grab the Grace here for later. And now let's just bypass Stormveil to reach Liurnia. It's going to be a bit before I fight any main bosses. Just the nature of Elden Ring, particularly when I'm using a weapon as suboptimal as bows. And that gets me to my destination here, the Blood Church. Blood Roses abound here, and I will need to pop back here frequently to stack up on my Blood Rose stockpiles. So just assume I've spent a lot of time gathering resources to craft arrows. It makes up a large portion of time in this run, and I will be skipping over it completely. And while I'm already here, I take some time to pick up regular smithing stones from these gazebos? I guess these would qualify as gazebos? And then the harrowing drop down to Jarburg. Jarburg has a good stock of respawning crafting items, specifically poison blooms, that I will absolutely need for arrow crafting. Next up is Caelid. Normally I come here to kill Grail for some free early runes. That's obviously not going to work with bows, because while I do have bleed access, that would take so many arrows. Instead, I loot some coffins for free runes and head over to the tower outside Radagon's castle. Here is the Arrow Sting Talisman, which boosts arrow damage by 12%. Most of my actual damage is going to be status-based, but I will need a good base damage as well, particularly for bosses immune to my best statuses. Next up is Celia. One of the fun things about bow only is, while I still have to do a lot of setup, it's very different setup than a normal run. Anyway, I'm just here to look at this pretty painting. Over to Fort Faroth, this gets me the second half of the Dectus Medallion, a free Golden Rune 12, and the Radagon Scar Seal. Always a good start for a run. And now it's time for some very careful drops. Some very careful drops. Very careful drops. I make it down to the painting location I got in Celia. This gives me the Rain of Arrows Ash of War. Okay, now it's shopping time, which is helpfully facilitated by all the random golden runes I've picked up around the map. That gets me some smithing stones, all the arrows I'll need for a while, and between all that, I can get my longbow up to +8. And it's finally time to face the first actual boss, the Bell-Bearing Hunter, who can kill me very quickly, it turns out, because I have no armor and haven't actually leveled up at all yet. Unfortunately for Mr. Hunter, he made the mistake of attacking me in the open world, which means I can cheese him with arrow shots from horseback. And the bell bearing this gives me means I can now buy bones from the Twin Maidens to craft arrows, which means I should probably buy the crafting kit to actually do that. And that means I can now craft bleed arrows pretty consistently. Alright, let's try this out on the Tree Sentinel. So my arrow damage itself isn't too bad, having a +8 longbow certainly helps. Tree Sentinel does move around a bit too much for the Rain of Arrows skill to be super useful, but I think that's going to do some good work against larger or more stationary bosses. Alright, let's get moving. And by that I of course mean more errands. And first is into this catacomb. With some stone sword keys, I can get access to this runway and grab first the Erd Tree's Favor. I don't have the talisman slot for it right now, but it may be useful later. Then shoot down these pots to destroy the chariot and get the Great Bow. I'm skeptical on whether I will actually use Great Bows. They do deal pretty good damage, but they are also very slow to wield. And the Erd Tree Great Bow deals holy damage, making it somewhat less appealing because all the major bosses in this game resist holy. Okay, time for my first proper boss fight, Margit. I have 99 bleed arrows and a pretty upgraded bow, and while Margit isn't huge, he can be surprisingly static most of the time, slowly walking to the side. This makes Rain of Arrows incredibly useful for getting a lot of hits for bleed buildup and damage. So, while the fight is definitely not pretty or clean, it is a first attempt, which is good because it takes a lot of arrows, and restocking arrows is already going to be an ongoing problem. I'm not patient enough to take the back way into Stormveil, so it's time to storm the gates, which goes about as well as ever. I don't know the exact timings on any of these dodges, I just know that if you believe hard enough, you can make it work. And with that done, it's already time for the next big boss, and first proper shard bearer, Godric. So, first problem is the spinning he does, which deflects my arrows. Good news is that Godric is about as mobile as Margit, but a bit bigger, which means Rain of Arrows is even more useful. Especially when I hit the Phase 2 transition, and Rain of Arrows can deal big damage while he breathes fire into the distance. Godric does love his fire projectiles, which have some interesting range and more interesting hitboxes, but through the power of running away and jumping, I managed to also take Godric out on the first attempt. Huh, I think Bo is actually doing better than any of my prior runs? That is both funny and sad. But first Shardbearer down means it's time for some more errands. First on that list is killing Nereus, who is weak to Rain of Arrows it turns out, then carefully shooting Patches a bunch of times. Doing this unlocks him as a shop and means I can buy golden fowl feet and the recipe to make more. I'm going to head south to Weeping Peninsula. There are a few errands I can complete here. First is buying a lantern so I can see in the Jarg, since I absolutely cannot carry a torch. Then grab golden fireflies to make golden fowl feet. Then some bird slaughter to get the bird feet I need. Oh, I know what I need next. Alexander, friend, I'm gonna need you to die, because that 10% bonus to Ash of War damage is just too good to resist. Then help Blythe kill Darrowell, mostly so that EG will sell me the talisman that reduces the FP cost of Ashes of War. Time to gather some easy souls. Killing the Erdtree Avatar here should do it, and while I say easy, I do actually die several times. Mostly because Rain of Arrows is just a bit slower than I'd like. When it hits, it does deal pretty good damage though, which is less often than I'd like. Oh right, jumping attacks. For reasons, jumping and attacking with a bow is just better than standing still. Archery hacks. Hi EG, please sell me the talisman to reduce FP costs. I picked up the glintstone key while doing some nonsense, which means I can enter Raya Lucaria. And arrows are actually quite effective against the mage guards here. Who would have thought? Alright Red Wolf, what have you got for me? Okay, my damage is fine, and I may be a bit underleveled. That probably shouldn't have killed me in one hit. One more try for the road. Yeah, no, that didn't go much better. The issue basically amounts to me not being durable and bows being a bit too slow for my liking. Red Wolf can bleed, and Rain of Arrows can deal pretty big damage, but Red Wolf also hops around the arena pretty quickly, making it pretty iffy to hit it with even basic attacks. Maybe equipping some armor will help? No, that didn't really help at all. Little extra defense doesn't help when your HP is this low. I haven't tried poison yet. I usually forget about poison because better poison already exists, but the Aeonian butterflies I need for Scarlet Rot are a limited resource. Poison Bloom is not. Takes 2 attempts, but I do then get poison off, though only after dropping half of Red Wolf's HP. Must have some pretty high poison resistance. From there, I can play a bit more cautiously and do some jump attacks to try and proc bleed. It's not the prettiest, but I do win the fight. Okay, it's time for my real rival, Guy with Shield, who I successfully sidestepped completely. Okay, I think Rennala is going to be a bit of a problem, which is never a good sign. In Phase 1, attacking her golden children is pretty rough because the lock-on doesn't seem to be interested in helping me, and even once she drops, I still run into issues of my damage being absolutely awful. It takes 4 cycles and all my healing to bring down Phase 1, and then I get destroyed by Crystal Barrage in Phase 2. Okay, more errands time. Through Raya Lucaria, stop in at Bellum Church for a sacred tear, and it's up to Altus. Here, I can destroy demi-human Queen Gillica with Rain of Arrows to pick up the Ritual Sword Talisman for increased damage at full health. I really want to buff my damage, but the reality is that I also just need some more vigor. But I guess there are other ways to buff damage. I can grab the Smithing Stone Bellbearing 2 here to unlock Smithing Stone 3s and 4s. That'll let me get my longbow up to plus 12, which should be a pretty decent upgrade in damage output. I guess we'll see. Although it may also be worth grabbing a short bow. It'll deal less damage, but Barrage is way better at proccing statuses compared to Rain of Arrows on smaller targets. And I think it's also time to start wielding the truly strong damage via Scarlet Rot. And the Abandoned Cave is an excellent source of butterflies. And then I waste them all by stupidly making Rot bolts instead of Rot arrows. Because I'm an idiot who isn't paying enough attention. Okay, well let's just head back to Rennala. Oh, yeah, I didn't kill this guy. That's actually a problem? Sneaking past him is really tricky, and I can't actually hurt him since he has a shield. Gravity is pretty lethal, though. Yeah, that's not great. I'm gonna need some more damage. Even with a bleed proc that only dealt like a fifth of her HP. Time to hunt for some more rot butterflies. Okay, back in, and yeah, the actual damage is bad, but I can proc Scarlet Rot pretty easily. And on subsequent cycles, I can just spam bleed arrows. Rennala is a lot more difficult to deal with in Phase 2, though. She's easiest to fight by hitting her in melee to stagger her out of her spells, which is not a thing I can do, for obvious reasons. And while I can't stagger her with arrows, that can actually get me killed by interrupting her into a faster attack, which I then can't dodge effectively with the jump shots. Rennala is definitely a fight that shouldn't be difficult, but it is actually proving to be a bit of a pain. And the whole needing to constantly afford arrows or arrow materials has exceeded my patience threshold. Really wish I'd started this run on PC so I could at least use save states to not waste arrows. I didn't, which means I'm going to have to improvise. Fortunately, there is a place where I can get comical numbers of souls very easily. But that does mean doing a bit of random quests. First on the list is killing Magnus, which is a huge pain because arrows are really bad at dealing with NPCs. It takes a couple tries, but I manage it. And then I can head from the Dectus elevator up to the Madness Church. I'm not going to bother fighting Vike, but I can get some blood and get the Pure Blood Knight Medal. In the Blood Zone, I can shoot this bird. It will run off the cliff and die. I'm not going to use this to farm souls for leveling, despite the fact that this would actually be way faster than fighting bosses, but it will be useful to afford the materials needed to make arrows, which should save a lot of time. Okay, back into the Rennala fight. Rather than burn through the rod arrows I'm going to need later, let's just use poison. Poison damage isn't nearly as strong, but it can still deal damage while she is otherwise protected, and with the fight taking, frankly, longer than I'd like, it should still be pretty useful. Phase 2 is still a problem, though. I don't really have any solutions to the many ranged attacks she has, and interrupting her with bow attacks can actually put me in more danger than not interrupting her. It's a rough fight, and the summons certainly don't help. I mean, if nothing else, at least my primary attack strategy is running, jumping, and shooting. This does help dodge and outrun her minions. It's not exactly foolproof, though. Rennala really needs to stop being such a problem boss. This is not a thing I'm okay with. Okay, time for another side quest. My short bow is great with its barrage skill, but I really need to upgrade it to actually get some base damage. Barrage is for status infliction, but more damage is more damage. Huh. Can bows even stagger Crystallians? Oh good, they can. Good news. And that gets my short bow up to plus 12. And again, we head back to Rennala, and yeah, wow, that's just way better damage. Which, yeah, of course it is. But I actually think it's worth just using Barrage for bleed procs rather than longbow attacks. I really should have done that sooner. Okay, that went better. Still not a victory, but definitely better. I think the short bow might actually just be better for the entire fight. Longbow has higher base damage, but that longbow moveset is just awful. And the next attempt finally does it. The stupid summons are difficult to dodge around, but the Barrage skill is fast enough to routinely knock her out of attacks and do considerable status damage. Okay, well that took way longer than I'd expected. This run is looking a bit grim. And that means I now have 2 great runes, which is technically all I need to get access to Leyndell. I mean, only a fool would try and take on DTS with this terrible build, but that's okay. I'm a fool. But this fight isn't actually a lost cause. One big boon is this fight's startup animation is so long, and combined with Barrage I can actually get a poison proc. The real problem is his fireball attack, which is super obnoxious. Bad news for DTS, he decided to stand outside, which means Torrent is on the table, giving me enhanced mobility while firing arrows. DTS isn't exactly a passive enemy, but there is a certain art to dodging his many fireballs while still getting hits in. Phase 2 is then, of course, a problem, with tight timings on the lightning dodges that make Torrent a less than ideal method of combat. The good news is, I've figured out a better method. DTS's fireballs are fast, but in my equip load, I can actually dodge and jump attack around the fireballs. It's still not a free fight and requires pretty careful movement and occasionally hopping on Torrent to heal and stay mobile, but thanks to a few poison and bleed procs, DTS goes down. And that means I'm into Leyndell. Normally, I wouldn't have rushed here quite so early, but I have a prize waiting for me here. The Black Bow. Much like its hunter cousin, this is going to be the main bow for the rest of the run. All the damage of a longbow with the moveset of a short bow. It's also a somber weapon, so it's easier to upgrade and has better scaling. The longbow may still have uses thanks to Rain of Arrows, but for everything else, it's gonna be the Black Bow. And that means I need upgrades. First on my list is grabbing Somber Stones, which I could have just bought from EG, but instead I hunted for them around the map. No idea why, apparently I'm just stupid. I do have to properly hunt for the other Somber Stones though, since I can't get those bell bearings yet. And with random Somber Stones around the map, I can get up to +6. But I have higher aspirations for the Bestest Bow, and that means I need to go to the easiest place to get a Somber 7, the Volcano Manor. which, spoiler, I will not be completing because Rykard would be super obnoxious. But there is a Somber 7 here, just have to do a quick boss fight. Godskin Noble can be a tough fight, especially if you play badly, but it is super vulnerable to status effects. And while my late rolling has been great, I think the extra defense is finally something I need more of. The Noble spends basically the entire fight poisoned and then getting constantly bled. And thanks to precision aiming, I can even deal damage while the Noble helplessly rolls against this pillar. Finally, a benefit to how stupidly long this attack lasts. And then I immediately left to go do something else. Why, you ask? No idea. Past me is an enigma. Maybe just to get some runes? That would explain killing the putrid avatar in Caelid. And then I head to Radagon, who immediately kills me, so that was not a great start. The good thing is that I can use Barrage to deal some pretty good damage pretty quickly. Doesn't help that much when I do a bad job of dodging attacks. When I do actually dodge, it's not that difficult of a fight. While Radagon has plenty of ranged options, he's really only lethal in close quarters. And having a bow that can very quickly inflict status effects, and having a horse that can typically outpace Radagon's attacks, this doesn't take too long. I mean, it should have taken even less time. To be fair, most of the deaths were one-shots because I have not put nearly as many points in Vigor as I really should have. In Dragon Barrow, I pick up the Somber 8, and 9, I need to get my bow more upgraded. Did I forget to pick up the 7 in Volcano Manor? Is that what that's all about? Me forgetting what I'm supposed to be doing? That's kind of embarrassing, actually. Anyway, 7 acquired, I can quickly get my black bow up to +9. I'll still need one more level to max it out, but that's a later problem. Back to Leyndell for like 2 minutes before I realize there are some things I need to do before I can continue. Okay, skeleton, rude. What I'm actually here for is the cookbook hiding in these catacombs. This will let me make lightning arrows. I just need to scoot around Altus picking up some lightning plants. And I need lightning arrows because my next big boss fight is immune to status effects. And that is Godfrey. Godfrey is weak to lightning, which is a slight boon. I mean, my damage is still absolutely garbage, but by interspersing jump attacks and the occasional barrage, Godfrey isn't too bad. Honestly, one benefit is the best way to dodge many of his attacks is by jumping, and that's something I want to do anyway to shoot faster. And already into another boss fight, Morgott. Morgott is very aggressive and will kill you very quickly if you let him. The good news is that he is very vulnerable to status effects and incredibly frail. So while there's not a lot of breathing room in this fight, it's actually one of the few quick fights. And it took only one attempt. That means I'm nearing the end game now. Definitely a few difficult bosses in there, but all in all, not too bad. Here's hoping Bo can live up to the mediocre standards established by its performance in Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. Fingers crossed. This trek through the snowfields is really long. Next boss is Fire Giant, who has a lot of HP, and is not a boss I want to be in a fight with for very long. I think I need more rod arrows. Poison is okay damage over time, but now that it's the late game, I definitely need more going on damage-wise. Which does mean a long side quest. And first fight on that docket is Loretta. I'm over-leveled with this area, and have lightning arrows. This fight is not particularly difficult. Then chat with Ronnie at the top of her tower to get my marching orders. Oh, while I'm here, I should also grab the Cold Arrow cookbook from Pydia. The more statuses I inflict, the better. Next up is Mimic Tier, who I absolutely cheese by removing all my equipment first. NPC fights are annoying enough without turning them into obnoxious archer duels. Nokron is an easy run-through to grab the finger-slaying blade, then back to Ronnie with the good news. Then the teleporter at the top of... Why is the store still here? Guess I'll reload the area? There we go. Ainsel River. I don't have any of the damage I need to actually fight anything here effectively. Good thing I can mostly just run through the area. Other than the silver balls. At least they drop larval tears. May need those for later. Ah, Lake of Rot. Terrible area that sucks, but there are a lot of Aeonian butterflies here by default, and the basilisks here have an okay chance to drop them. Hopefully I won't need to do too much butterfly grinding, but you never know. There are a lot of rottable bosses left in the game. And first on that list is Fire Giant. Very durable, but also very rottable. In retrospect, Fire Giant is probably big enough to have used Rain of Arrows. Oh well. Phase 1 is pretty easy. His attacks in this phase are pretty simple to dodge, and Rat does some big work. Okay, now it's Phase 2, and the Fire Giant's ranged options amp up considerably. He can still be rotted, though it does take a while. And I don't want to get too close in case he unleashes one of his many nonsense area attacks. Fortunately, he is also literally bigger than the broadside of a barn, so free aiming with barrage is very doable. Despite some close calls, a last-minute bleed proc brings him down. Alright then. Faramazula is now available to me, but I have a different plan. and that requires me to face Captain Nile and his 2 buddies. The Knight with 2 swords is really easy to kill, Shield Boy is a bit more difficult because, well, shield, and then it's just Nile. I don't think I ever realized how passive he actually is before his 2 knights die. In theory, this fight could be pretty tricky, but shooting Nile from a distance seems to constantly trigger the same attack pattern? And it takes a little bit of practice to dodge, hence the low HP and no healing items, but then I can just keep dodging. It's surprisingly easy. It's not fast, mind you, but it is pretty easy. Alright then, secret medallion check. Oh, I never got the other one from Albus. Whoops. Let me just thank y'all. And into the secret Halig Tree Path and the consecrated snowfield. I am here for one thing and one thing only. Around these white trees are rhymed crystal buds for cold arrows. Like, a lot of them, too. Between the various white trees in the area, you can easily get over 100 per run. The run is a bit dangerous, but whatever. If I die, I die. Oh, right. I guess I have to kill Insha. I don't normally have to do that. That's neat. And back to Raya Lucaria, because I forgot to buy the recipe for sleep arrows. And now I can head into Faramazula. But there's no time for silliness, time to rush through. Which I've done so many times and absolutely know how to get away with. Next boss time. The Godskin Duo has proven to be a pretty difficult fight in prior runs, because fighting both Godskins at once is pretty challenging. However, that will not hold true with bows, because both Godskins are very statusable. Particularly Sleep, which turns this potentially difficult 2-on-1 into a very easy 1v1. Oh shoot, I shot too many arrows. One downside of Barrage is that if you hit an enemy with 1 arrow too many, you will immediately break the sleep effect and wake up your target. Which is not ideal. Not game ending though, thankfully, especially when Trina Lilies don't respawn. Time to run through the rest of Faramazula. Surely this can't be too difficult. What could possibly get in my way? Oh right, birds. And you would think that bows would be uniquely equipped to tell birds to go away. And well, you should be right. You're not, though. Every single bird is a harder fight than the Godskin Duo. They move very quickly, arrows have no tracking, and my damage is awful, meaning one shot isn't even close to enough to kill the birds. Whomever decided this bird run should exist, I hate you. I do manage to run past and kill the dragon to get the Ancient Somber Stone, and then I have to contend with the actual threat, the one stupid bird that followed me all the way here. Go away, you avian piece of... Okay. We're good. It's time to head back to the Round Table Hold and finally upgrade my black bow to +10. More damage. Huzzah. And no, I will not be fighting this tree sentinel. He is not my problem. Huh. There sure is a lot of time left in my recording of a section titled Maliketh. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. This is gonna be a time, isn't it? So this fight is very much a 2-phase fight. The first phase isn't too bad. Usually, Gronk is fast and has a lot of ranged attacks, but much like Goldfree, has a lot of ground-based attacks that are most effectively dodged by jumping, which makes dodging and attacking in quick succession really easy. Maliketh then becomes the problem, in part because he kills you so quickly it's difficult to learn his moveset. At some point I need to set up a cheat engine table to set max HP in myself and some of these bosses to properly practice them. Because dodging Maliketh's attacks is not at all intuitive. And while Maliketh is vulnerable to status effects, he's not super vulnerable, and he deals enough damage it's hard to stay alive long enough to actually inflict any meaningful status procs. Scarlet Rot would be great, but it's pretty hard to attack that aggressively against a boss this damaging. And of course, every failed attempt is more wasted arrows. Not a huge deal for poison, bleed, or frostbite. I can buy bones and the specific crafting materials are very plentiful. Aeonian butterflies are not. They don't respawn and can only be dropped by those basilisks in the Lake of Rot. Note to self, if you ever decide to suffer through a crossbow-only run, record it on PC so you can take save states. All these wasted arrows is a huge waste of time. I try this fight in a few different ways. Super light to allow for fast roll time, slightly heavy armor to take attacks. I even tried the longbow with rain of arrows, but yeah, no, these are all bad. Maliketh is just so strong, and the stupid black blade effect is unkind. Actually, I think I see the dodge. This attack is a big problem. Just dodging it doesn't get you out of range of the follow-up AoE, but if you break lock-on and run forward, you can both dodge the initial attack and the AoE. That is the worst attack he has. Is that enough? It might be, but I'm also out of arrows. Please excuse me while I do some off-screen grinding for Aeonian butterflies. Whee! And you may notice I changed up my wardrobe. I may have traveled into the depths to get some new armor. It has higher physical and holy resistance. My hope is that this will give me enough extra oomph to put down this jerk. And hopefully quickly, because I don't actually have that many more rod arrows. Okay, so not quite enough. Well, since I'm using resources anyway, how about I finally use a Great Rune? Specifically Morgoth's for the increased health that might actually help me here. And I proceed to Scarlet Rot. Now, I don't need to be nearly as aggressive. Just wait, make careful shots, and finally, Maliketh, you jerk. Alright, up next is Gideon, who I am also concerned about. Gideon is a bit of a meme, however my damage is pretty low, and NPC fights in this game often suck because they are really good at dodging arrows. I do get some pretty good damage out while Gideon monologues, but then the fight starts to proceed, as it often does, with me getting absolutely blasted with spells. And the first attempt failed. Bummer. But I have some ideas to make this not a disaster. Like all NPCs, Gideon can do a pretty good job of dodging all my ranged attacks. However, he also casts a lot of spells, leaving himself very vulnerable. So, rather than spam attacks, I need to time my shots. Comet Azure, in particular, can be dodged with a jump and attack, which Gideon can't dodge back. Humorously, Gideon is at his most dangerous at close range, where his tri-discus is basically impossible to dodge. This fight isn't fast, but status procs and good jumps do all the work. But uh-oh, did someone stop the recording for a minute to go do something and then forget to restart for Hoarah Loux? Foreshadowing, how did you get here? Yep, I did a mess up. Didn't record any footage, and that sucks. It was a pretty good fight. Played really well. I didn't even get grabbed, and that's a real bummer. A smarter me would have saved the footage on the PS5 to see if I could use that for the video, since it has that default share thing that I don't know anything about. But sadly, I didn't even think of that until it was simply too late. So that's that. No Hoarah Loux footage. Is what a quitter would say, because I've been lamenting not just playing this on PC, where save states could have helped me not waste arrows and have to grind out replacement materials for hours. But I do own Elden Ring for PC. Cheat engine does exist. How hard could it be to match the equipment and stats I had at this point and just do the fight again? Easier than expected, it turns out, but more difficult than I'd hoped. Mostly because my experience with Cheat Engine is pretty limited, and I've never used it for Elden Ring. So behold, Hawkeye, again fighting Hoarah Loux. Same stats, same equipment, same everything. Except no wondrous physic, because I actually forgot about it. And you can see that this fight is actually pretty easy with bows. Hoarah Loux is pretty vulnerable to statuses. And while he can close distance pretty quickly, he also loves to use ground-based attacks that are easily jumped. Even Phase 2, where he gets a lot more aggressive, the fight isn't really any tougher. In fact, it might be easier because keeping your distance baits out attacks that are very easily punishable by bow attacks. And yeah, it only took 3 attempts to bring down the big man. And I did get grabbed right at the end, mostly because I was trying to greed out a frostbite proc, but it didn't actually matter. It wasn't enough to kill me, and the rot was able to finish him off anyway. Only 3 attempts at Hoarah Loux, almost 2 weeks after I actually played the game. Not bad, not bad. And that means all that's left is Radagon. And how hard can Radagon be? He's vulnerable to poison and frostbite, and I have a lot of practice at dodging his attacks from the dagger-only run. He is also vulnerable to Scarlet Rot, but I've sadly burnt through all my arrows and really don't want to have to grind out anymore, because it is super tedious. Again, really should have just recorded the entire run on PC. Uh-oh. 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 This is a big problem. Issue 1, I'm dodging super badly. All that dagger-only practice has apparently been completely lost. Problem 2, my damage is awful, and unlike Hoarah Loux, Radagon is pretty resistant to status effects. For context, Radagon is nearly twice as resistant to poison and Scarlet Rot. Issue 2, Radagon is a little cheater. He has this move where he can just catch projectiles out of the air, meaning getting in any attacks, especially those that proc status effects, quickly is a huge pain. And of course, third, my vigor is at 47, which is a good bit lower than it probably should be, especially for a fight this taxing. I do at least manage to get poison to trigger on a few occasions, but that poison damage is real low. I mean, it's more damage, which is nice, but oof. I really do just need Scarlet Rot, don't I? Ugh, okay, time to back to the drawing board. And by that I mean back into the fight, having grinded out Aeonian butterflies. Just so I can burn through them, apparently. With Radagon's stupidly high Scarlet Rot resistance, it's going to take at least 13 arrows to trigger Scarlet Rot. and that is assume I hit every arrow and hit quickly. And between Radagon's many ranged attacks and needing to find an opening around his cheating block attack, that is a hard thing to hope for. So instead, I'm wasting upwards of 30 arrows on every attempt where I actually manage to get Scarlet Rot to trigger, only to die. For context, the section of this run where I'm trying to beat Radagon, including all the grinding, is nearly as long as the entire rest of the run. I'm so tired. So let's go through all the nonsense I tried to make this fight not suck. And I'm going to be summarizing heavily because otherwise this would be a while. I tried respecking to gain access to Flame Grant Me Strength and Shibriri's Woe. My damage was better, but still worse than Scarlet Rot, and still not enough by a good margin. Good thing I went down to Nokron, so I have a ton of larval tears, because respecking is going to be my best bet. Next up was the Serpent Bow to take advantage of the increased poison buildup, which did mean triggering poison faster. Too bad the Serpent Bow is a longbow and therefore has a much slower moveset, and no barrage. And Serpent Bow doesn't help at all with any other statuses. I tried being half naked for better dodges, and had I been better at actually dodging, it might have worked, but it didn't. In fact, I think the faster dodges actually messed with my timings. At one point, I even took a break to head through the Hylic tree. Mostly because you can get Aeonian butterflies there, and yeah, Loretto is very easy. She bleeds, she poisons, and she frostbites. The easy victory was a nice respite from constantly slamming my face against Radagon. Still didn't help, though. I ended up just burning through all my arrows again, so no rot for me. I need to try something else, and that means respecking some more into a strength build. I've spent most of the game using longbows, or longbows pretending to be short bows, but now it's time for big bow, which means Radagon's bow, because it's the only bow I have that doesn't deal holy damage. It also gets a damage boost when shooting the big arrows you can buy from Enya, and the immediately bad news is Radagon can still catch big arrows. And while the big arrows do deal big damage when they hit, the attack speed on these arrows is just awful. I don't think big bow is going to help. I was really counting on big bow. I don't know how much more of this I have in me, because I die, and I die, and I die for hours. And I don't have the arrows I want. I don't have the arrows I need. I can't do this anymore. Time to get some backup. Because I said only bows. But you know who else can wield a bow? Mimic Tear. Because I don't want to do this anymore. So it's back to the black bow with only rod arrows equipped, so my Mimic Tear will have infinite rod arrows. And then I can switch to other arrows to double up damage procs. And some might call this cheating, and I do not care. I will admit that Mimic Tear is actually really bad at using a bow. He doesn't quite understand the jump attack or the timing to not trigger a counterattack. So while the distraction is really nice, I'm not actually super convinced that Mimic Tear is that effective of a combatant with a bow. Good to know. And it actually comes a lot closer than I'd like, with Mimic Tear ending the fight with basically no health. I was legitimately concerned that Mimic Tear wouldn't be enough to beat Radagon either, and then I really don't know what I was gonna do. Mimic Tear does die immediately in the Elden Beast fight, which I actually am happy about. It means I can 1v1 the Elden Beast. And this fight is way less bull than Radagon. I can use my plus 25 longbow and rain of arrows to do pretty good damage, thanks to my regular and Stormwing bone arrows. Elden Beast's attacks are also a lot easier to dodge, and once I get sick of getting hit trying to get off rain of arrows, I can simply switch to barrage from a distance. Elden Beast is just so much more punishable than Radagon, even ignoring his stupid no projectiles ability. Also, I can ride Torrent, which really helps evade all the bull that Elden Beast used to punish you with. And there it is, Elden Beast dead, and I can finally stop doing this run. But hold on a moment, Zeph, you have Cheat Engine now. Your biggest complaint was having to farm to replace arrows. You don't need to do that. You can just do the fight again on PC, and just stock up on more arrows with a single button press to stock up your back inventory. And that's true, except I don't know very much about Cheat Engine, and I don't know the flag that makes Radagon show up. So if you try to fight him right after Hoarah Loux, this happens. Which is very funny, but does mean a rematch against Radagon is beyond my Cheat Engine skill set. Is what quitters would say, because there is actually a Grace in Radagon's arena, and if you manually enable that and warp to it, there's no Grace, and no boss. But if you then take a few steps forward, the camera will jerk and spawn in Radagon. It's rematch time, because I have all the arrows I need. I can still only carry 99 of each arrow type at once, but my backstock between attempts is now infinite. I can just press the Gib item button if I run low. And I don't know if it was just the 2 weeks break from Elden Ring, the not having to worry about running out of arrow stocks. Maybe it's just rage, but I'm in it. I see the moves, I see the dodges. More importantly, I see the openings. I don't have to think about whether I'm wasting arrows. I have 99 arrows for Rot and 99 arrows for Frostbite. It's still not an easy fight. This is definitely on my list of least favorite fights, but I'm going to see this red-headed dead if it's the last thing I do. And on the third attempt, he dies. I can finally let this end. Oh, this feels so much better. I mean, then Elden Beast completely destroys me because I honestly wasn't actually expecting to beat Radagon. I don't have my better damage arrows, I don't have my plus 25 longbow with rain of arrows, I don't even have torrent on my quick items. But that's fine, any beef I had with Elden Beast died when they let me ride torrent in this arena. And I checked, and I made it to Elden Beast with 1 blue flask and 4 red flasks. Exactly as many as I used in the actual fight I won. And you know what? That is good enough for me. And that is Elden Ring, beaten with only bows. And I am very tired. I really suffered this run for my unfortunate combination of laziness and stubbornness. There were a lot of ways this could have been done better, and going forward I definitely should record on PC directly. I was a little concerned my PC would struggle to record and run the game at the same time, but I think the footage actually just looks better. Probably because my capture card is so cheap. But I will have more to say about that in the summary video out next week. I did want to shout out that I do have a Patreon, linked in the description. I spend a lot of time making these videos. So if you enjoyed the video, want to support the channel, and are financially stable enough to do so, that exists. No pressure though, this channel is free to enjoy for everyone and will remain that way. For now, if you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of this, feel free to subscribe. Hey, maybe leave a comment if you have something you'd like to say. But whatever you decide to do, have a safe trip home.